Eternal Undying Love, Chapter 1, Part 2. Written by Keane. 2 days later, all the teenagers were still talking about what had transpired. Sixth period came, and it was lunchtime. Fake food, 2% milk, and fries that were as hard as jawbreakers, yet the line was full of kids who were hungry and looking for a place to sit. The jocks came in, pushing the less popular teens around, laughing and carrying on about some poor overweight kid who was eating nearby all alone. Then, the usual ritual of pushing the weaker aside in the line so they could show their superiority, as well as be the first to eat. "Pricks," one nerd mumbled. Moose walked over to him, pork chopped him in the back of the head, then hawked a loogie on the poor guy's pizza. "Well, you gonna eat that or not?" Moose asked, then pushed him in the face and turned and walked away. John just stared in disgust at the big jock. "One of these days, fucker, you'll pay. You will pay," John thought to himself. As Moose started towards his friends, a girl walked by, nervously, with scraggly hair and thick Coke bottle glasses, holding her tray. Moose yanked it out of her hand and continued towards his laughing and obnoxious friends. She gritted her teeth in anger, showing off her braces unintentionally. "Look at the grill on that ugly bitch," Tommy pointed for his jock friends to see. "Give me back my tray," she demanded. "Wash your hair, you greasy cow," Steve replied. Steve Manning was one of the meanest bullies in school, but at home he was nothing more than a waste of life to his own father, who became an alcoholic after Steve's mother died from lung cancer. Steve was poor and got beaten a lot by his father, and he knew his only chance to make it in life was football. And to be top dog in school, you had to be ruthless. Deep down inside, he was dying. He wished he didn't exist sometimes. A week ago, he and his girlfriend had been fighting, and he had lost his temper and slapped her. "Did that make you feel like a big man, Steve? Now you're nothing, just like your father!" she had screamed. He went home angry and depressed and drank his father's Jack Daniels. "You want your tray back, bitch?" Moose smiled evilly. "Yes," she demanded. "How's it feel to want?" he laughed. Her anger was too much now. All the bullshit was too much. So she slapped the big jock. Hard. His friends laughed as Moose stood there, stunned, holding his red face. "Well, Moose, you're not gonna let that ugly whore bitch slap you and get away with it, are you?" Steve joked. Moose stared at his friends. Moose stared at her, and his face changed from surprise to rage, and before his friends could stop him, he took the tray in one hand, and with his left, he grabbed her by the back of her hair and slammed the whole tray of food into her face. Everyone watched in silence and shock as she fell to the hard cement ground, face first, unconscious and bloody. A young teacher named Fabian Andrews had seen it all and stood directly in front of Moose. "You get your ass down to the principal's office now. I'll make sure you're suspended for a long time. And you're gonna lose your chance to play in the big game this Friday," Fabian blurted. Moose laughed. "My father's the principal, bitch! If anybody's gonna be put out of the school, it'll be you." Fabian watched as Moose sat down with his jock friends to eat. A moment later, Fabian carried the hurt girl down to the nurse's office. "Man, you didn't have to hit that chick, and that teacher's a cool dude," Reggie spoke up. Listen up, I don't have to listen to no one, especially not some two-bit N-word." Moose insulted his own friend. Reggie stood up. No, motherfucker, I know you didn't just call me a motherfucking N-word. I ain't one of these little bitches you push around. Reggie stared Moose down. When Moose stood up, Steve got in between them. Guys, let's chill and just eat. Shit got a little out of hand, now let's just eat. Nah, man, this fat prick ain't gonna call me names like that. I don't care who his daddy is. I will lay the smackdown right here on his ass. Reggie pointed. Excuse me. All the jocks stood up and stared at Reggie. The look in their faces was all he needed to realize where he stood with these guys. Yeah, now I see how it is. Some friends you guys are. Reggie shook his head in disgust. It was obvious they would have jumped him if he had fought Moose. He'd been their friend for a little over 6 months, but the truth was, they didn't like Reggie. They did like winning football games, however. Whether he was a skilled quarterback or not, they'd been in this clique since grade school, and they weren't going to side with a black man. So Reggie walked away. Fucking rednecks. Things never change. He mumbled as he walked down the hallway away from the cafeteria. Outside the school, the sky began to fill with dark clouds, and the teens outside watched ominously as the sun hid quickly behind the darkening sky. Then lightning and thunder exploded and the winds picked up. The teens hurried inside as the downpour of rain and hail erupted. The sky then turned a sick yellow color. Looks like a tornado might come, Mike spoke. Jenny shook her head. I watched the news with my mom before I went to bed last night. Supposed to be sunny skies and good weather. Well, the news was wrong, Jenny. Does this look like sunny skies to you? Mike asked. Get away from the windows, the teacher advised. It was raining so hard now, you could not see a glimpse of the sidewalks outside, nor the roads for that matter. Finally, after a long moment, everyone who had been near the windows came to the conclusion that peering outside was futile, because you couldn't see anything anyway. So they all sat down and resumed their schoolwork or whatever assignments and tasks that were at hand. No one noticed the black Cadillac that just made its way off the main road and through the school entrance, which it was now headed towards the student parking lot. The same black Cadillac that had been involved in the chaos and kidnapping of a young black girl who had still not been found. It was like she never existed. Many of the teens had to be moved to other rooms because not all the windows had been repaired. The principal announced that if the weather got any worse, there might be a drill. About this time, the disruption in the cafeteria died down, and the jocks sat quietly at a table near the lunchroom's entrance. 15 minutes till 6th period would end. Moose was still in his obnoxious mood, but the jocks began to talk about more serious things at hand. A young man with white pants and a cheap-looking white t-shirt with "Jesus Saves" embroidered across the front of it entered the cafeteria and made his way over to get himself a tray of food. As he turned around, tray of food in hand, he discovered everyone staring at him. There was whispering and quiet giggling. John could not bear to watch this guy get taunted, so he got up and tossed his food in the trash and put up his tray. As he walked by the guy in white, he spoke quietly but quickly. Good luck, you're gonna need it. And then John left the lunchroom in a hurry. The guy in white stood there confused and puzzled. The Christians in the back just shook their heads when the guy looked around for a seat. This was an obvious signal that, though he himself appeared a Christian, he was not welcome at their table. They instantly judged the new guys They instantly judged the new guy's looks and evaluated quickly that this guy was dweeb material, that the jocks would surely have their way with him, and they weren't about to invite trouble to their little congregation. The metalheads chuckled along with the goth types, but it was the goths who gave more obvious disgusted looks. It was apparent that within a short moment, he wasn't winning any popularity contests here. Then he spotted the nerds and geeks. These were the smart kids who got thrown into the inevitable category, as do all in high school. "Fresh meat, how sweet!" the jock Tommy cackled. The new guy just took one more look at the Christians and smiled, then spoke quietly to himself where no one else could hear it. "Thou shalt not judge, lest ye be judged thyself." And with that, he proceeded towards the unpopular table, located in the middle of the cafeteria. But as he took a few steps to pass the jock's table, he discovered a huge leg that blocked his paths in hope to trip him. He followed the leg with his eyes to discover the perpetrator was in fact Moose, the biggest jock in school. "Now, is that any way to treat a Christian? A man of God?" The teen in white spoke, pointing at the Jesus Saves logo on his shirt. "Dude, let's just chill for a while. There's plenty of time to pick on this loser," Steve yawned.
"Looks like it's your lucky day today. You may pass for now, but tomorrow you'll be doing stands in the shitter,"
Moose chuckled as he turned back around to continue eating. The guy smiled and continued to the table and sat at the end. All the teens who once resided at this table left abruptly, leaving the young man all alone. He looked up to find Moose staring at him from the jock's table, laughing hysterically with food in his mouth, and Tommy cackling like a deranged hyena.
"These Bible beaters crack me up, preaching that shit. I don't see why they don't save it for their churches,"
Tommy ridiculed.
"Yeah, we get along fine, just as soon as they figured out I'm God."
Moose chuckled with food in his mouth.
"Isn't religion illegal in school? Religion and government divided and shit?"
Tommy finished.
"Yeah, crack's illegal too, but you don't see the pigs doing shit about that either."
Moose laughed as he slapped an overweight girl on the behind as she walked by. The girl just rolled her eyes and kept on walking.
"Crack kills, lardass,"
Tommy blurted, giving Moose the high five.
Let's leave Free Willy alone.
She could be dangerous when she eats," Steve joked. It was moments later, after the cruel jokes the jocks had to offer, that the girl sat across from the man in white. He looked up and smiled at her.
Is it okay if I sit here?"
she asked.
Only on one condition,"
he replied. She rolled her eyes and asked,
"Okay, what?" "You gotta tell me your name, or let me take a guess."
He smiled, folding his hands.
"Okay, guess,"
she said, amused, expecting a joke. He rubbed his temples in concentration, then looked up.
Amy Mandel."
She was now surprised and astonished.
"How did you do that? How did you know?"
she asked. He took a drink of his milk, then replied,
"Well, I just thought of what the most fitting name would be for the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen, and, kazoom, it happened, Amy Mandel."
He chuckled.
"Cute, but I take it you don't see many women then?"
she said sarcastically. He clutched his chest like he was having a fake heart attack.
"I'm wounded. Why would you say that?"
He asked, smiling.
"I'm a lot of things, but beautiful, I'm not,"
she replied, looking down. He looked at her, stunned.
"Well, come on, look at me. I'm the poster child for fat people.
She spoke. He began holding his chin with his thumb and finger, giving the impression to her that he was in deep thought.
Well, personally, the only problem I see is that you're just a tad overweight. But with some exercise, I could see you being the head of cheerleading and perhaps the most attractive girl in this school. I mean, look at your eyes and smile. Poetry in motion. He smiled.
Staring into her eyes. Sorry. She stared back at him in awe. She couldn't believe she was hearing this from a guy who, in her opinion, was fine as hell.
What is your name? She asked curiously. Christian, he replied immediately. That's a nice name, she commented. Thanks, Amy, he replied as they sat for a moment.
She glanced at his short black hair and ocean blue eyes and noticed he had a nice skinny build and his expressions were very sincere. He was very unique, she thought. Something mysterious about him, and he was fascinating to her.
So, I've never seen you here before. Are you new? She asked.
He nodded.
So, what do you think about Quiet Meadows?
She took a drink.
Well, the name fits the place, he replied. I was wondering, 'cause of the t-shirt.
She pointed at his Jesus Saves shirt.
Do you believe in God or something?
She giggled.
Oh yes, I do. Actually, do you?
He asked.
Nope,
she answered.
And why is that?
He asked. Excuse me.
When I was younger, my mother used to force me to go to church. She would make me get up early in the morning and she would say, Amy, if you don't go to church, God will send you to hell. Praise his name or be damned for all eternity and all that horse shit, she said, shaking her head. I'm sorry that happened to you, Amy. And what about your dad, if you don't mind me asking? Why was your mother like that?
He asked.
My mom wasn't always a church hermit. Her and my dad used to be pretty wild. My uncle, who was my father's brother, told me this. My dad had died from falling asleep behind the wheel, and my mother flipped out. We lost everything during my mom's nervous breakdown. See, I heard a preacher say once that God would never put too much on a person, and that God wants us to be as innocent as children. But he broke my mother to the point that she lost her mind. And what kind of God would let a child suffer?
Amy finished. Christian stared with total interest of her words.
I'm boring you, aren't I?
She smiled. She felt like she said too much.
No, you're not. Not only are you attractive, but very deep as well. And I'm happy to have met you.
He smiled.
So, how's everyone been treating you?
She asked. He looked in the direction of the jocks and discovered Moose giving him the bird and replied,
Stupid is as stupid does.
She smiled at the whole she saw the whole situation and laughed at the Christian wit.
So you really think I'd look good if I lost weight? She asked. You already look great, honey. Don't sweat these people in the school. I used to have to put up with the same stuff when I was big. I lost weight through exercise, but what you gotta understand is they're just ignorant. Believe it or not, it's like this everywhere. I have transferred from school to school, and it's all the same. If it's not one thing, it's another with these types of people. Sooner or later, they'll grow up, and the truth shall set them free. He smiled at her. She smiled back. That's a really interesting way of putting it. The waiting for people to grow up part could take a long time, though. Maybe forever, she replied. Well, Amy, they reap what they sow. It all comes crashing down in the end. It always has. Always will, he finished. Yep, and what a web they've wove, she sighed. Amen, he laughed. Now, I'm still wondering who the guy was driving that black caddy. Dude comes strolling in, flicks a cigarette, almost burning Karen's tits in the process, then takes that fat black bitch and drives off with her ass hanging out the window, Tommy said to his jock friends. What are the police doing about the situation, Steve? Your father's the chief of police, so they should know something. Tell you the truth, from what I heard, they ain't doing shit. They say it's either gang-related or a pissed-off boyfriend. My dad says she's probably out making kids with the guy so she can collect more welfare. Steve replied.
Yeah, not that I give a flying fuck, but what makes them think it was a boyfriend? Or like a gang thing?
Moose asked. Well, my dad explained it like this. He told me the blacks who were in the parking lot wouldn't give up any info or help, which probably indicates a gang deal or boyfriend. But he also said it's mostly blacks who drive big cars, like black Cadillacs with the big car systems they steal, and sunproof windows to make sure no one sees them smoking weed. Hell, could have been her pimp for all we know, Steve shrugged. So why stop and flick the cigarette at Karen's tits? Tommy asked.
Shit, man, that wouldn't be the first nor the last time that slut had something between her tits. That's just something a guy does.
Jeff the red-headed jock snorted.
Hey Jeff, that's my sister you're talking about,
Tommy blurted.
Chill out, bro. Just trying to ease everyone's worries. Quit whining like a little girl,
Jeff insisted. What if the dude comes back? Tommy asked. Now there was total silence as the jocks contemplated the new thought. As usual, it would be Big Moose with an intelligent answer.
Then, we kick his pussy little ass, burn out his fucking eyes with those cheap-ass cigarettes that he smokes. And if that fails, we'll have your sister screw him to death.
Moose laughed, pissing Tommy off. As Tommy was about to strike with a hateful comeback, the lights went out, then flickered back on. The cafeteria became deathly cold, and chills swept over everyone's spines. Lightning and thunder exploded so loud it was deafening. The lights died and came back on, and there at the entrance of the cafeteria stood an ominous, dark figure. The jocks stared and were not far from staining their undies. Coal-black hair, with a few strands of ghostly white, rested like a blanket of darkness over the broad shoulders of this man of black. Shades like the Terminator, and a black and red goatee to boot. Thick eyebrows that curved like bat wings. His eyes were concealed behind the black shades, but it was evident what he was staring at. Across the cafeteria, he scoped out his prey. The young man in white, known to Amy as Christian. The jocks stared him down. Everyone but Moose showed concern. Though the stranger appeared to be 6'6", Moose estimated his weight at a little over 250 pounds. All muscle, he felt like he could take the guy if need be. His black leather trench covered most of his enormous physique and broad shoulders. He wore black leather boots with spiked jewelry, a belt buckle that resembled a skull, made of metal, and the belt itself appeared to have distinct design of hieroglyphics. The upper body concealed with a black sweatshirt under the trench, with the crucifix logo on the front. It was then that the man of black began to remove his black leather gloves, revealing round, hole-like scars on his wrists, exposing to some who assumed it was huge cigar wounds, but the Christians who sat in the back knew all too well what statement the scars were making. The man must have inflicted the wounds upon himself, in hopes of resembling the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. At the same time, looking young, he also appeared to be like that of a resurrected corpse, being that his skin was so very pale. Everyone but Moose became worried, as they all speculated that this was, in fact, the driver of the black Cadillac.
Steve grimaced as he remembered the blood that dripped from the bottom of the car door into a small puddle on the road. The man of black walked slowly but melodically as though the wind carried his awesome torso. It was then that Moose put his leg out, like he did everyone, just for shits and giggles, to trip people or block their path. The man of black stopped and slowly turned his head to stare at the arrogant teenager.
"You're the one with the rich daddy, aren't you?"
The man of black spoke in a very low tone. The other jocks were surprised at their friend's behavior. Moose wasn't scared of anyone, they thought. That's why they had appointed him their fearless leader.
"Yeah? So what's it to you if my dad's rich?"
Moose blurted. Like lightning, the man of black stomped the big jock's knee until it made a loud, sickening snap that the whole cafeteria could hear, but wished they didn't. As Moose lay on the ground, whimpering like a one-legged dog, the man of black sneered as he stepped over him.
"Good. Then your daddy can afford to buy you a new wheelchair."
A lot of people hated Moose for being a bully, but they were feeling sorry for the poor lug now. Football was now out of the question. There was no doubt about that. Aisle by aisle, the man of darkness walked until he reached the end of the table where Christian sat across from his newfound friend, Amy.
Is he a friend of yours?"
Amy stuttered, frightened.
"Oh, him.
Christian smiled, pointing over his shoulder.
I run into him from time to time, but as you can see, he doesn't talk too much. Not good on the communication skills, yet can be quite nasty. Isn't that right, Damien?"
Christian turned to face the man of black. Amy became very confused at the behavior her friend was displaying.
"Is he going to be trouble for you?"
Amy asked in dismay and utter fear.
"I don't know. Is there going to be trouble? I'm sure you don't want to cause a scene right here, do you? You know, so everyone can see what a monster you really are."
The man in the Jesus Saves t-shirt stood face to face now with the dark figure. With lightning-fast reflexes, Damien grasped Christian by the throat and hurled him violently into the cement wall 6 feet away. As Christian slid down the wall, he fell pathetically to the ground as the man of black walked over and kicked him in the gut. He was pleased to hear something break inside the young man in white. Christian wheezed and spit up blood.
"Remember what has happened today, because every day you walk these halls, I'll be walking these halls, and if I even sense you, I'll make you bleed. Any of you who walks or talks with him, well, you're as good as dead, that I promise you."
The man of black eerily threatened. He began to walk by slowly past Amy.
You can't just come in here and assault me. There's rules, Damien."
The man in white gasped. The man of black turned towards him and replied,
"I didn't make the rules, so who's to say I'll follow them?"
Finally, Damien was satisfied with the damage he had done and walked past Amy with one last piece of advice.
"Do yourself a favor. Stay away from this guy, or suffer the wrath of hell. Be afraid. Be very afraid."
And with those last words, followed by lightning, the lights went dead for 3 seconds. Then as they came back on, the man of black was nowhere to be seen. He had disappeared, vanished into thin air. Tears forming in her eyes, Amy ran to the fallen Christian to help him.
"Are you going to be okay?"
she asked. He looked around at the cafeteria, which was full of teenagers, wondering if what they had witnessed was an illusion or a dream gone badly.
I'll be fine. I think it's poor Moose that needs more help than I. But thank you anyway."
Christian pointed. The teenagers that were staring out of the cafeteria watched in awe as the black Cadillac made its way out of the entrance of the school, and now they knew they were having a nightmare. As the car sped off, the dark clouds, rain, and yellow sky seemed to follow, as though it was literally magnetized by the man of black. As soon as the car disappeared out of sight, so did the nasty weather. The sun was out again, and birds began chirping. "Why did he attack you?" Amy asked, concerned. "He's a troubled soul. Ever since his girlfriend had the hots for me, I told her, being that I'm Christian, she wouldn't be my type because I only date nice girls." Christian stood up. "Well, does a man of God have a phone number so a nice girl can call?" Amy smiled. "Are you sure you want to talk to me after what just happened?" Christian grimaced as he rubbed the back of his sore head. "Shit, my brother's meaner than that. If he touches either of that, I'll call the police and have his ass charged with assault. That's what you should do," she informed him. "Nope, I'll just turn the other cheek. Take everything with a grain of salt, like always." Christian groaned with a sharp pain. "Yeah, but sometimes you gotta stand up for yourself, or people will keep trying to kick your ass," Amy chirped. An ambulance was on the way for Moose. As Christian and Amy walked down the hall, he smiled and said, "Maybe you're right, Amy." "I know I'm right. Now let's go see the nurse," she demanded. "Okay. You got spunk. I'd better listen to you, or you might kick my butt," he joked. "True, it's true. Don't fuck with a pissed off fat girl," she laughed. "I'll be sure not to. Lead me, old wise one," he gestured. End of chapter 1.